So full disclosure, when I originally started this video idea, I was going to frame it from the perspective of piggyback versus offset red dot. But the more that I thought about it, the more that I realized that that's been covered a lot and people have done a pretty good job with it. So while I might piss off some offset truthers right off the rip, I do think that the piggyback method is probably the way to go for a lot of people. But I do think there's another interesting debate, and one that probably could use some more discussion, which is, do you prioritize your 12 o'clock for a secondary red dot, or do you save that space for a weapon-mounted laser rangefinder? Welcome to the Truth and Freedom Ministry. My name is CT. Let's get into it and ruffle some feathers.
You're pretty wiggly to lay down on that. Yeah. No. No.
Okay, so for all you folks that want the quick answer, I do think that the piggyback or the 12 o'clock or the top mounted dot is what I would recommend for small frame 5.56 scoped carbine platforms. For larger platforms that are thinking like an AR-10, a SAS, a bolt action, or you could even make the case for 6-arc, I do think that leaving this vacant for a weapon mounted laser rangefinder would be a good call. Probably means going with an offset dot if you want to have both worlds. And so I'll go into the greater why if you want to stick around for the fun details, and I'm sure that will create some buzz, and I would love to hear everybody's strong opinions in the comments. There was quite a few of those on the last video, so I do appreciate a passionate audience. But beyond that, I'll go over dot considerations, I'll go over mounting considerations, I'll go over even some scope considerations, and then I'll talk about brightness levels, zeroing distances, and night vision use. I have no relationship with any company or product that I'm discussing in this video today. I bought everything with my own cashola. I did reach out to Coing, who is a company that specializes in optic mounting solutions for the AR platform, and they do make this acro adapter that I have here. However, I purchased that before I ever started this channel, and I reached out to them because I wanted a third party, more of an industry perspective that specializes in this area where I might be able to glean some information and some perspective and give some value to you as an audience. Now that all the impatient people have left, we can kind of take a 1,000-foot step back and ask the question, why? Why do I even need a red dot on this when I already have a scope? So the short answer is more and more people are gravitating towards traditional scopes that don't have a 1X at the bottom end. More people are pushing into scope carbine or precision rifles. And so with that, people want a secondary way to be able to have a 1X type optic. And so red dots are a great choice because they are fairly unobtrusive, they are pretty lightweight, they are getting more robust by the day, they also don't cost a ton of money anymore. And so red dots make a great choice for that. Then the question becomes, well, where do I put it on the rifle, right? You don't want to probably put it on your handguard because there's more point of impact shift or just flex in your rail. So a lot of people will take a attachment and they will put that on their Picatinny rail of the receiver, and they will put it at a 45-degree angle for their red dot. Others, like you can see myself here, are using a top-mounted dot where you're most likely attaching it to the scope mount. Where I do think there's more nuanced discussion to be had is what I'm calling the real estate conundrum. I think most people watching this are familiar that you only have so much available real estate, whether it's attachment-wise on Picatinny and M-LOK, or it's a trade-off when it comes to how heavy you're making your rifle, right? I think someone like Brassfax or Nutnfancy would call it size and weight considerations. And most people always talk about it at the front end of the rifle, right? So theoretically up here, you could have a white light, you could have a suppressor, you could have a laser, bipod, backup sights, right? What a list. Alternatively, I do think that the 12 o'clock position is becoming more and more precious real estate. Back in the day, and just up until recently, it was really a debate about stock and head preference, whether you wanted to go with piggyback or offset. But nowadays, the Piggyback red dot has to contend with weapon-mounted laser rangefinders, and those are becoming more and more common as we move into the future. 3 off the bat that I can think of is the Vortex Impact 4000, the Tango Fire 4000, and then the Maztec, I think it's the X4 LRF, right? All of these are becoming increasingly available and the price is going down. And so the question that's really a realistic question to ask in 2025 is, would I rather prioritize this with a secondary sighting system, or would I rather put a weapon-mounted laser rangefinder that's going to help me range targets at unknown distances and be able to get a ballistic solution for me to be able to engage, especially as more and more people are pushing scoped carbines and precision rifles. And so another disclosure is that I don't own a weapon-mounted laser rangefinder. Shock! How could he be talking about this? Unclick. But thankfully, we all have critical thinking. That's something God blessed us all with. We can forecast into the future or imagine realistic scenarios where we might use a tool. And so it's really not much of a stretch to do that. I also have a ton of experience with non-ballistic range-finding devices too. So hopefully that puts your fears at ease.
In editing this, I realized I never really gave a resolution to this debate, but in essence, I don't really think there's as much of a use case for a laser rangefinder on a small frame scope carbine. I think the technology is amazing and I'm likely to own one even in the next year, but to me, it's a specialty accessory that I'm only likely to leverage in a sniper challenge type competition or when time is on my side doing precision rifle training. If your use case dictates that or another reason, then you should steer towards pairing one with an offset red dot. If you're using a SAS or a bolt action platform, you can keep a dive board on there, put an offset red dot on there full time, and then mount a laser rangefinder in a pinch when needed. However, I don't really see that being something I would use often on an AR-15, whether it's during training or scoped carbine competitions. Think like DMR matches, the recent Spark matches that are going on in Utah, or the 2-gun matches that you're seeing footage of. That's a significant amount of weight that's already on what's supposed to be a fighting rifle. And as we move further into a passive aiming world, it's also worth noting that laser rangefinders are an active aiming device, which is something to look at when it comes to the next-gen weapon system or the Vortex XM157. It's getting some criticism because there's risk of giving away a user's position.
So what red dot do I pick, right? I think this is probably one of the more boring parts of the discussion because there are so many red dot videos that are online. You could search it on YouTube and find 10,000 videos. For every optic I name in this next segment, there are probably 20 reviews alone. But if I was going to take a stab at it, I would start with going with an enclosed emitter red dot. And I'm going to start with that because 12 o'clock puts you at a more exposed position. You're going to run into things like dust, debris, rain, snow, all of these elements that are more likely to gunk up your red dot. So open emitters are kind of at a disadvantage in that regard. Also, you're going to be banging this thing against barricades. It might take a tumble, it might fall. This might be the first thing that makes contact. I'm not saying that these are going to stand up to a direct fall onto pavement, but I do think that they're going to stand up better than an open emitter. If I was going to name off a few, there are tons, but this is the Steiner NPS. There's also the Aimpoint Acro that I mentioned earlier. The Holosun EPS is a great one. Vortex has their new enclosed Defender series, and those look great for the price point. If I was going to try to save money, I would probably go with an Aimpoint Micro footprint or style. You still keep the enclosed idea of it, but you're gaining a bit of weight and size that you need to factor in with your scope. But some of those budget options like the new Romeo 5 Gen 2 series, the Holosun ARO, all of them changed up their names since I was last looking into it in like the last few years. But primary arms if you're broke, primary arms if you're short on funds. But yeah, if you really want to push it and you want to just go no thrills, very simple, I think the Holosun 407C is one of those open emitter ones I might give a try. You can find those for like $150 nowadays. Mount up, mount up, mount up, mount up. If we're talking mounts, you're staring at a Nightforce one right here. But there's a lot of great companies that are making pretty versatile ecosystems that support a lot of footprints. So thinking about Leupold, Badger, Reptilla, American Defense, those are all great options. They're in that $200 to $300 range, right? So if you were looking at something really cheap, there's the Primary Arms SLX mount. That plus their top ring cap costs about $120 MSRP before sales. Now the trade-off is that it's made in China and that the only footprint they support right now is the RMR. But if you wanted to buy something like that and pair it with, say, a 407, then you're probably looking at a very affordable, decent setup right off the bat. For all those other ones that are very high quality, you shouldn't have any problem mix and matching or finding ways to configure the footprint of your choice. Part of the reason I steer people towards Coing is because they have a pretty versatile aftermarket support system. They provide mounting solutions for pretty much most of those footprints for Nightforce, Leupold, and Badger. When I asked them about why, they said that those were all very robust, strong mounts. So I just thought that was interesting to note. They also do low profile dive boards for all of those scope mounts. So they're not fully invested just in the Piggyback system. They do also offer options for your weapon mounted laser rangefinders. For rifle scope considerations, you're most likely going to see people pairing all of this with 2 to 10s, 2 to 12s, 4 to 16s, 3 to 18s, and even higher magnification scopes than that. There's a lot of great high quality scopes on the market. I've largely covered this in a lot of my other previous videos, so I would just point you in that direction if you want a really detailed type of overview. But you're looking at the Steiner 2 to 12. This is their H6XI series. It's got a great mill reticle and it is compact, so it works well when pairing this with a Piggyback. A lot of people use the Leupold Mark V HD 2 to 10, or they use the 3.6 to 18. I think that those have a very strong reputation. Never really played with those for too much. I have had experience with my friends Nightforce ATAC 4 to 16. Those do great. When I'm talking about my experience with this right here, being a 2 to 12 and a Piggyback, I can tell you with confidence in all of the competitions that I've used this in, I have leveraged my 1X a lot. I think there's a myth that people say, oh, you're gonna put your 1X on there, but then you're really just still gonna use your 2X all the time. So this is just that sort of redundancy thing, or it's never gonna be as good as if you just have an LPVO on 1X. But I can tell you, with enough training, you can really use this with high confidence, and it's sort of second nature, especially if you just put time in, put your reps in, do your dry fire with it. I absolutely do recommend putting a Piggyback on there and using it for your 50 and in. There was a stage in a 2-gun match where I had to shoot offhand on a wobbling bridge, and instead of using my scope where I could barely even get my eye relief squared away, I was able to use the Piggyback, right? It would have been pretty hard to do if I had to go offhand by using my non-dominant hand, I should specify, and do it with an offset dot, right? In the tactical game skirmish I competed in, there was a lot where we were doing 50 and in. I was leveraging the Piggyback on that, using it with good speed too. So I can definitely recommend something like this for a mid-power scope. When I'm being transparent about using this with LPVOs, I probably would just stick with an LPVO. I don't see a lot of reason to put a Piggyback on there. A lot of people will do that just as a redundant thing in case your like LPVO gets blown out, but somehow you're surviving that and your Piggyback is surviving that. It's like, that's kind of a reach, right? If my primary system is out and done for the fight, I'm in bad shape, right? And so the follow-up to that is, well, I need to use it for passive night vision use. I can see an argument there, but also, you know, think about just how often you're going to use that. Do you own night vision? How often are you actually using your night vision? Are you competing with it? Do you have a laser? Can you use that laser for active aiming? All things to consider when it comes to putting something like this on an LPVO. I'm sure there's going to be people typing away frantically right now, but those are just some initial thoughts on use case for scopes and Piggyback pairings. As far as brightness setting goes, I keep this thing very bright. I want to be able to use it in all lighting conditions. Most of the time I'm going to be doing stuff during the day, and in direct sunlight, I want this to be visible. If I'm using it under white light, I want this to be visible. If I really need to dial it in and fine tune the size of the dot, I probably have time on my side. It's a bit of a generalization, but I do think there is some truth to it. If I'm going to be using it in passive night vision, I do also think that same logic applies. I'll probably have time to be able to dial this down to a level that is workable with my monocular. As far as the dot size goes, I lean towards that 2 to 3.5 MOA size dot, because when I'm cranking this thing up, the dot's going to look bigger to me. If I went with a 6 MOA plus dot, it'll be even bigger, which I don't really need, right? So in essence, small MOA dot, full brightness. As far as zeroing goes, I'm going to just straight up refer you to Delta 34. He's like the king of zeroing and offsets with your optic systems. He has such a robust library of videos with amazing graphics that I could never do justice. So definitely check out his channel. But if you want kind of the spark notes of my thoughts on things, that 10 to 25 yard or meter range I think is a good option for a lot of people, because it's pretty easy to dial in. It's probably the most realistic use case for something like this, is more close quarter. The downside is that your drop, if you want to extend it further, gets pretty wild. 50 meters is that Goldilocks kind of happy balance. A lot of people zero their primary red dot on rifles at 50 because there's that common, hey, it's at 50 and 200. But if you're going to do this, I would recommend you actually push out your target or your steel to 200 and then confirm and verify. It makes you a better marksman, and you're probably going to find there's a bit more of a difference than you thought. Finally, the 100 meter zero on something like this, I think keeps your system apples to apples. Right? This primary optic is zeroed at 100, then you can keep this at 100 and then everything's squared away. However, something you have to contend with is just that it can be a kind of a confidence killer trying to zero that as tight as possible out at 100. So I would recommend you start at 25 or 50 and then do your final dialing and tweaking out at 100. Ask me how I know. Piggybacks for night vision use. They're definitely a thing. Some of the pros being that this is going to be higher off your receiver, and so it actually allows you to kind of get a line of sight with your monocular or your tubes a little more conveniently than if you had this thing down at like a 154 height. Having an enclosed emitter or just a dot that gets down to night vision brightness levels does allow you to do passive aiming. The Steiner MPS isn't known for its passive night vision performance, but I will tell you that you can use this. It's not going to be the clearest thing in the world, but this isn't an Aimpoint T2 that is sort of designed with that specifically in mind. I've had night vision for 3 years. I am going to do a more detailed video talking about 3 years of night vision use as a civilian, so I'm going to be kind of putting a lot of material together to prepare for that, but I've primarily used active aiming in those 3 years. I've tried out a lot of laser combinations, and I will gladly share what those ones I've been using and running and just testing. But because of that, I haven't had a ton of experience doing passive use. Now, it is intuitive enough that you can kind of dive into it, but it's just something to consider is how much are you actually doing night vision shooting? Do you own nods, right? All of these things I kind of already mentioned, but they're worth asking again and being honest with yourself. It's getting late, but I wanted to read some scripture before we close out. And side note, you don't have to spend money on Gucci camo Bibles. You can literally go to your surplus store and buy a UCP camo Bible for dirt cheap. I'm going to be reading out of the book of Exodus. This is Exodus 4, verse 10. Moses said to the Lord, "O Lord, I've never been eloquent, neither in the past nor you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue." The Lord said to him, "Who gave man his mouth? Who makes him deaf or mute? Who gives him sight or makes him blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will help you speak, and I will teach you what to say." But Moses said, "O Lord, please send someone else to do it." Then the Lord's anger burned against Moses, and he said, "What about your brother, Aaron, the Levite? I know he can speak well. He is already on his way to meet you, and his heart shall be glad when he sees you." Now, I like that verse because the Lord has literally met with Moses at the burning bush. He has told him his plan for Moses. He has told him all of these amazing things that he wants to do in terms of freeing his people. And yet, Moses gives hesitancy after hesitancy after hesitancy, fear, and more doubt. And there's a point where the Lord literally gets angry with him, but he still knows Moses' heart, and he knows Moses truly is afraid and he doesn't think he's up for the task. So instead of trying to convince him, you can do this alone, he invites his brother Aaron. And so I think there's a lot of takeaways we have for that, but one would be most of us, when confronted with what the Lord wants us to do, are going to be so uncertain of it that that we cause doubt in our souls, right? But that's okay. It's something that the Lord has clearly come in contact with people that he's used in extraordinary ways. And he will also put people in your life to help you support the mission he wants you to be on. So take care. Hope you enjoyed this one.